Recently, I was browsing YouTube.com when I saw a video that really piqued my interest. It was titled, "Lavos was never the villain," and was an opinionated video essay on why Chrono Trigger's Lavos is an antagonistic force, but not a villainous one. I thought it was interesting, so of course I checked it out. Unfortunately, the contents of the video were strange enough for me to make this video as a response. So before we get any further, I want to lay down some groundwork so I don't bring any definitions out of nowhere or confuse anyone. For starters, what is a villain? Or what does this title of villain mean? To make things simple, a villain is an antagonistic force that is evil, and an antagonist is the force opposite to the protagonist and is something that they must overcome because that is in the way of their goals. Now, what is evil? Evil is a bit more vague of a term, so to keep things simple, I'll classify evil as the inversion of morality. I know some people are going to say that morality is relative to culture, but within the scope that I'm invoking morality, I seriously don't think there is a culture on Earth that considers any of the moral or immoral acts discussed in this video to be opposites. And even then, I don't care. If you want like Zimbabwean neo-Buddhist morality, then go watch a video from whoever believes in that. Anyways, for example, it's moral to help out other humans in need. Therefore, seeing someone bleeding out and outright refusing to attempt any form of medical intervention or comfort them in any way would be immoral and therefore evil. Another important thing is that morality can also be tied to knowledge of it. So for example, a Komodo dragon has no qualms with brutalizing other Komodo dragons, even children. Meanwhile, humans are vehemently opposed to the slaughter of other humans, especially children. This is because the Komodo dragon doesn't know morality and therefore doesn't know that murdering a child is wrong. With that out of the way, I should now explain what my part in this analysis and response will be. It's my understanding that Lavos' morality and status as evil is left rather ambiguous and is up for speculation. There are certain aspects of it that can make it lean one way or the other depending on how you interpret them. So for the argument that Lavos is evil, we have the following. Lavos is a parasite. Parasites feed off of their host by harming them, which is immoral. Lavos caused the Queen of Zeal to go mad with its power, and subsequently manipulated her into using its power to destroy Earth. Lavos is the entity that created the gates between time periods, and that's because they link to times where it directly influenced history to cause human suffering, such as it crashing into the Reptite layer and causing the eventual Ice Age in 65 million BC, it eradicating the Kingdom of Zeal in 12,000 BC, it causing the Fiend War in 600 AD, and finally, Lavos decimating the world for its offspring to take over in 1999 AD. And lastly, Lavos manipulates fate to manipulate evolution on Earth in order to create the best evolutionary traits for it to steal for its offspring. Chrono Cross and the DS-exclusive Dream Devourer fight explicitly show Lavos as an evil force that explicitly wants to destroy all that is and was. Although, I think it's okay to ignore this and all Chrono Cross related content, because not only is that game a void of continuity that was probably sabotaged by a Final Fantasy fanbrat, but I think it's important to keep conversation exclusively on Chrono Trigger when talking about Chrono Trigger. The sequel came afterwards, and therefore so did whatever canon that the writers came up with for it. Now, the arguments that Lavos is not evil are the following. Lavos is a parasite that feeds off of the whole planet, but as an animal it is incapable of understanding morality and therefore just does its own thing, the exact same way a tick does. Lavos caused the Queen of Zeal to go mad, but that's because her mind was corrupted by immense power she harvested on it, and it didn't consciously do anything to her. The entity that created the gates between time periods is either Lavos by accident, as the time periods just so happen to all be connected to Lavos, but their creation isn't Lavos' fault. Or the entity that did create them is Shala, trying to gather a group of people to stop Lavos by binding them through a manipulated fate and having them all see Lavos, and also see Zeal to understand how everything happens. As of how Lavos isn't necessarily responsible for the events of each time period, all Lavos did in prehistory was show up. It was literally a meteorite that happened to collide with Earth. Lavos' emergence in antiquity was it waking up after the Mammon Machine put an immense amount of strain on it by being overworked, and naturally, because the Mammon Machine was harvesting its power, it retaliated by destroying everything around it before going back to sleep to continue its life cycle. The Fiend War in the past was simply caused by Ozzy and King Guardia starting a war. Lavos' only involvement in that era was because Magus forcefully awakened it. The destruction of Earth in 1999 was part of Lavos' natural life cycle, as it needed to terraform Earth into something that its spawn could grow up in before leaving the planet for somewhere else. And lastly, Lavos manipulates evolution, but without malice, as it's just instinctually doing so to create a more successful generation, as all organisms do. All of this hinges on Lavos not possessing human-level intelligence and not being aware of morality. This, of course, conflicts with Lavos being some malevolent being that has an immense amount of hatred towards life on Earth, or even Lavos being some eldritch god that is far beyond human intellect and far beyond reasoning with humans. So that's why this whole argument exists in the first place. The title of this video is rather misleading. The purpose of this video is simply to analyze the video itself and point out how parts of its proofs and its many assertions are incorrect, unsourced, or poorly backed up. I don't actually want to inject my own opinion here, but rather I'd like to analyze how this video fails to provide an accurate and proper analysis. So this is more of a dissection than a debate. The title was just really funny and probably eye-catching, and so was the thumbnail. With all of the context out of the way, it's time to analyze and respond to the video itself. So the video starts off strong with the thesis presented. The main villain of Chrono Trigger isn't actually a villain, which is unorthodox when compared to other JRPG titles at the time. Although he keeps referring to Lavos as a villain, when he should be referring to it as an antagonist, since his thesis is clearly that Lavos is an antagonist but not a villain.
The villain of Chrono Trigger, Lavos, has always stood out to me amongst other RPG villains, because he's not really a villain. See, RPGs like Final Fantasy and Persona always have presented enigmatic and boisterous villains that seek to destroy or rule the world, giving us the player a hateable antagonist that we're motivated to stop. Lavos has no discernible ambition or morality as we understand it. It operates as an interstellar parasite, manipulating evolution and consuming planets to reproduce, making its destruction both calculated and devastating. It's nothing more than an interstellar parasite that seeks to reproduce and destroy. It's certainly not the only gaming villain to be utterly emotionless and unreasonable, but it's somewhat unique in a JRPG setting.
Now, a constant we'll be seeing in this video is that he brings up attributes of Lavos and argues for the interpretation of those attributes, proving that Lavos isn't evil, such as its parasitic tendencies being very animalistic, although he calls it cold and calculated, which is literally just calling it evil, but whatever. But he refuses to even acknowledge the interpretation of these traits that point to Lavos being evil. I don't know if he just doesn't know about these arguments, or if he's just doing this for the sake of confirmation bias.
See, most RPGs have the god boss as a twist final villain that only shows up once the main antagonist is defeated. But almost right from the beginning, Lavos is the overarching threat our party faces. Instead of subverting our expectations later with a twist, Lavos is an overwhelming force our party gradually builds up to facing. It's a massive departure from traditional RPG villains, where just a year earlier, Kefka was the driving force behind most of Final Fantasy VI.
This part of the video just confuses me, because out of the 3 JRPGs he's talked about, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VI, and some Persona game, at least 2 of those don't actually follow this formula. Final Fantasy VI has Kefka as the main villain from the very start of the game, and there's no twist god boss because you literally just fight Kefka at the end of the game. You could argue that the twist is that he becomes a god or something, if he didn't already become a god roughly 10 hours ago in game time, at the end of the second act. Final Fantasy VII has pretty much the same thing happen. Sephiroth is unequivocally the villain from the start, and his ambitions of becoming a god are very apparent from roughly the first act all the way to the end where he reveals himself to be a god. I'm not sure about the Persona game though, as I've never played any of the Persona games.
Where Kefka's apocalyptic actions were motivated by rage, spite, and madness, Lavos' destruction is merely biological in nature.
This is 100% accurate. It really doesn't know or care about the party because it's not like Kefka or Sephiroth, which are people that have direct interactions with the protagonists of their games. Also, Lavos' goals extend far beyond any mortal strife it may inflict or be brought to the attention of, so even when facing the party, it doesn't care about any emotional baggage they may or may not take with them to their next encounter.
It's almost unnatural to have a villain so detached from what our heroes are doing, to not even be aware of their existence until they finally work up the nerve to challenge it. With Lavos' indifference to our heroes, it creates a tension throughout the game that comes from existential dread. No matter when we go or what we do, Lavos is always waiting just below the surface, feeding on the life force of the planet. Throughout the game, you adventure around fully aware that an eldritch horror is festering below, something that doesn't know you exist or even care about you.
So, Lavos being indifferent to the party creates tension, and that tension creates existential dread.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
I think I understand what he's trying to say, but I think he phrased it in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense. Lavos is an insurmountable obstacle for the party to overcome, and the fact that it doesn't know or care of their existence can cause existential dread, especially since it can feel like nothing you can do will ever stop it because evidently all you've done so far isn't even enough to make it notice that you exist. It's like your entire journey has been in vain. And that's a prominent theme in Chrono Trigger, both with Queen Zeal's philosophy of trying to say that destiny is set in stone and you, the player, can't do anything about it, and also with the haunting message of, but the future refused to change if the player loses to Lavos. But I'm not sure how Lavos not caring contributes in and of itself to existential dread. I think he knew what he was trying to say, but kept wrapping it in layers of fancy language and diction like all the other video essayists do in order to sound smarter, to the point where he changed what he said and made it much harder to parse.
It's an absolutely chilling parallel to obsessive villains like Sephiroth, who revel in tormenting the heroes. Lavos merely does as it always has.
Minor complaint, but it's not a parallel, because parallel means to be going in the same direction, and he's describing in going in entirely different directions. A more appropriate descriptor would be a sharp contrast, which also sounds nice and fancy like a true video essayist.
By putting Lavos in the background, it helps to make each step of Chrono Trigger an unforgettable experience. Because as we hop around different eras, we're allowed to immerse ourselves in that time's issues, allowing for the episodic storytelling the game prides itself on. With the threat looming in the background, it allows the immediate plot to be filled with a multitude of colourful villains, such as Magus and Zeal.
Absolutely.
This point is plain wrong. Lavos is the through line between every time period in Chrono Trigger, and the only reason you're going through those time periods is to get closer to Lavos. Literally every time period has some sort of issue stemming from Lavos, or at least the party has an issue related to Lavos in that era. If Lavos was simply at the back burner and wasn't responsible for a major part of the subplots of each time period, then Chrono Trigger would just be an anthology. But it's not. Chrono Trigger is one story from start to finish that is entirely knitted together by the existence of Lavos, and maybe Shala. Also, I like how the clip he shows in the background is of Lavos taking over the mind of Shala and turning her into a being that wants nothing but death and destruction for all that is and ever will be. So literally, the clip he's showing right now is Lavos being unquestionably evil and therefore a villain. I know it's from the Chrono Cross lore, which we both agreed was irrelevant, but it's still important that you show footage that reflects what you're talking about. Also, he calls Magus a villain. Is he? Maybe to Frog, I guess, but the only really villainous thing he does is kill Cyrus. Aside from that, he's only really an antagonist because he gets in the party's way of trying to stop him from awakening Lavos, even though they both want to destroy it. So he's like a half antagonist for a portion of the story, and does like one villainous thing ever. Even as Lord of the Fiends, he doesn't even partake in the ongoing Fiend War. He lets Ozzy Slash and Flea handle all the warfare while he focuses on what he actually wants to do, which is summoning and killing Lavos.
But while these characters certainly constitute a typically evil antagonist for a JRPG, it raises the question of what that makes Lavos. It's nothing more than a force of nature that's done what it's evolved to do. It's almost like the Colossi in Shadow of the Colossus, as Lavos is nothing more than an animal with no malice or will of its own. I mean, if you remove the time travel element from Chrono Trigger, then as far as we know, Lavos is just a peaceful rock with an unknowable purpose, who sat and wait for 65 million years, waiting for its day.
Hold the phone right there. Lavos, without Chrono Trigger's time travel, does not exist. Lavos is an entity that has influence over time. It is partially responsible for the time gates existing and literally resides in a place called Time's Eclipse. You can't just remove the time travel aspect of Lavos to try and make a point. Unless, of course, you don't like the idea of having to debate over Lavos' involvement in the time gates and would rather just say your opinion without having to back it up with what actually happens in the game, like the game's main mechanism of story progression. and especially without having to back it up in the face of scrutiny.
It truly is a being of cosmic horror that doesn't have any motivation to hurt anyone. It just feeds on the nutrients of a planet before leaving to feast on another. It's the exact same function that a tick has, only on a cosmic scale.
Doesn't have any motivation to hurt anyone. It's a parasite that destroys planets. Its entire purpose for existing is to hurt trillions. Then he goes and compares it to a tick, which by design literally does nothing but hurt things.
Now I know what you're all screaming. Lavos is absolutely evil. Chrono Cross is explicit in how it is a malevolent force. But while that's true, it's not what Lavos was originally intended to be. Lavos was meant to be this amoral, almighty entity that destroyed the world with no consideration for its inhabitants. So forgive me for ignoring the information introduced in the sequel, but I only want to discuss what Lavos was originally intended to be in Chrono Trigger.
As I've mentioned earlier, I agree with this for the most part. This discussion is for Chrono Trigger related content, although he completely neglects the fact that Lavos' morality is still left extremely vague in favor of stating his opinion as a 100% absolute fact, as if it was meant to be like this and there's no room for interpretation whatsoever. I think he's realized that the easiest way to make an opinion piece, have it be a video essay, and have it be easy to write, like not having to think of counter-arguments to back up your claims, and God forbid, not having your view challenged, and have it all be condensed into 5 minutes, is to completely ignore any opposing beliefs and pretend like yours is 100% already proven in the game, so you can just say it as a fact in the middle of your proof that it should be taken as a fact. Also, the footage he's using is once again Lavos being unmistakably evil, as it is literally the Chrono Cross lore of Lavos being 100% malevolent, but he's showing this footage over talking about how Chrono Trigger has Lavos being 100% not evil with no room for interpretation whatsoever.
So when the party decides to save the planet from this galactic parasite, they face a creature that displays neither rage nor fear, but a machine. There's no other word for it.
Actually, there is another word for it. It's an animal. That's literally your thesis, as you've literally mentioned before. An animal is basically just a machine that does as its instincts program it to without worrying about self-awareness or ethical dilemma, to a certain extent. I mean, there's some... You could debate over the philosophy of that by saying, like, the soul of something, like, that makes it alive makes it far different from a machine. I don't know, I don't really want to talk about that right now, though, because that's not really relevant.
Lavos is a completely still shell that spawns minions and emits attacks as soullessly as a spaceship fires its lasers.
I'm so confused. It's an animal, but it's also a robot now. Like, what do you mean soullessly? It has self-preservation instincts, doesn't it? Like, it is a living being that has a will of its own. It's just such a weird way to describe something. Like, imagine if you were talking about a lizard and you described it as a robot. Like, this lizard operates exactly like a motorboat does as it swims. Like, within reference to how it swims and goes from point A to point B. It's just such a weird way to describe something that is living as a non-living thing. I think there's a clear distinction between an animal that reproduces and eats and lives and thinks and a spaceship or a robot. Like, what the hell is he trying to say here?
It doesn't tremble when it's attacked, it just tries to swat you away as you unleash one devastating attack after another.
It just tries to swat you away as you unleash one devastating attack after another, one devastating attack after another,
on its oceanic health pool.
This is true. Lavos is indeed bold as a lion during its fight. I don't know if that makes it evil or not, but whatever.
But then the shell cracks, and you journey deeper into Lavos, and you're confronted with its core, an utterly alien concept that's every bit as inhuman as its shell. And after the exhaustive battle is complete, and you destroy the core at the metaphorical heart of this force of nature...
Metaphorical heart? It's the literal heart. Like, what else is this? This is literally the core of Lavos found deep inside of it. I know I'm basically just arguing over semantics and like some minor grammar complaints, but the fact of the matter is, I think this is indicative of how he writes and structures his essay. There's so much in here that is kind of all style, no substance, where he says things that sound fancy, like the metaphorical heart, or it's like a spaceship, or like a machine, but they don't actually have any real meaning, or they have a meaning that doesn't make sense when you really scrutinize it. And I think that's just stupid, because you are making your points make less sense when you actually think about them, in favor of making it sound nice if you turn your brain off and just kind of nod along with whatever he's saying. Like, this is kind of like the type of video that you can just watch in the background and do something else while listening to and actually have a better experience.
It lets out an animalistic, blood-curdling screech that comes from what's probably the first pain that Lavos has ever truly felt. Probably the first pain that Lavos has ever truly felt. And you realize at the end of the day, this was just an animal that was trying to feed. And you realize at the end of the day, this was just an animal that was trying to feed.
So this is just like a valid, very valid interpretation of Lavos' cry when it dies. It is just a death scream. Of course, I put that little clip in there of an interpretation that it's a war cry, which, I mean, it is a war cry. Just this interpretation is that when Lavos dies, it could also be a war cry, instead of a death scream, because, oh my god, this poor creature, this poor little critter, it's never had experienced pain before, and it just now did. Don't you feel like a monster? It was just trying to live, you sick bastard. I hope you feel ashamed of yourself for saving trillions of lives for literal millennia to come. But anyways, I put that funny Predator clip in there to poke fun at the author of this video, because he seems to be almost like sympathetic to Lavos in a way, like he's trying to make people feel bad by saying, oh, this is the first time it's ever experienced pain in its life. And it's like, it's a parasitic tick, even if it isn't evil. Like, I think it's a natural human response to be extremely mad at it. I don't know, maybe that's just a me thing.
It didn't hate you or even know you existed. It had as much hatred for you as a boot does to an ant. It's never going to know why what it was doing was evil. From Lavos' perspective, you were the first life forms it had ever seen, and you relentlessly attacked it, making it feel pain for the first time in its eons of existence. Making it feel pain for the first time in its eons of existence.
I don't know how much I believe that Lavos can't understand why we're attacking and killing it. Like, I don't think that lions get confused when the small hyena fights back, and I don't think that humans, cats, or whatever get confused when spiders bite them. But, more importantly, Lavos lives to siphon the most valuable genetic traits of the organisms it outlives, and therefore, I think it should have harvested the intelligence off of humans, corvids, and cetaceans at this point, but even without that, it has to at least understand that humans would want to eliminate it, as it's literally just a basic instinct for all organisms to either hide from or eradicate what threatens you. In fact, most organisms have an entire portion of their brain dedicated to either sitting there like a deer in headlights frozen, fighting back like the small hyena versus the lion, or running away when something threatens you.
Lavos was a monster, there's no question about it, but if you look at it from a purely analytical perspective, all you did was kill an animal that was trying to eat enough to give life to its young. It's no more evil than a lion hunting a buffalo, but the fleas on that buffalo have something to say about it. For more JRPG essays, here's one about how Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 can make the original's weirdest scene work in the modern day, and I'll be back in 2 days.
I don't really like this conclusion. It literally just translates to objectively I am correct, which is a stupid conclusion when you haven't even explained why the people who are incorrect by shooting down their interpretations and their opinions with your own interpretations backed up by dialogue and events in the game. But whatever, really. Also, this guy really just said, here's how I would update Final Fantasy VII for modern audiences, and I'm supposed to be taking his opinion seriously. So that was Lavos Never Dies by the video game essayist.
Okay, so this is me editing here. I'm going over the footage, and for some reason, I called the video title Lavos Never Dies. I don't even want to replace that, because that is so funny to me, because, like, that's not in the script. I don't know how I said that. I don't remember saying that. I didn't catch myself saying that. I am racking my brain trying to figure out how the hell that happened. But, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it in there because it's funny.
In conclusion, this video was an opinion piece, but it failed to delve into the actual inner workings of his opinions by looking at the events of the game as proof for his points, and also it failed to address potential contention to his opinions. As a result, it was literally just 5 minutes of someone simply saying things rather than saying something and proving it, and maybe also providing reasoning for why people saying the opposite are wrong. I guess this is how he manages to make tri-weekly uploads of video essays of all things. I tried watching some other videos of his. One was about Final Fantasy XVI and slavery, and for some reason he started talking about capitalism when it really made no sense in context. Also, it was a feudal government system in Final Fantasy XVI, so why even mention capitalism? Also, slavery is actually bad for capitalism. Not a lot of communists understand that, but if you have a rich guy who can make his own workforce, not pay them, so not contribute to the local economy, not pay taxes on them because, you know, you're not paying anyone wages, so not contribute to the local economy, and also not hire anyone because he has his own slaves, so not contributing to the local economy, then you basically have, like, the opposite, the worst thing for a capitalist government, like a rich guy who doesn't pay any taxes at all. So I don't even understand how you can arrive at that conclusion that slavery is a capitalist thing, like that it's good for capitalism or what capitalism wants. Anyways, he has like 3 video essays praising Assassin's Creed Shadows, so I think this is sufficient enough data to conclude that I'm better off watching any other video from any other video essayist, assuming they would ever upload. Speaking of better video essayists, I guess Mahler has a good YouTube channel, I guess. What, did you think I was gonna say that I was a better essayist? That's pretty cute. Oh, also, stay tuned for Castlevania Symphony of the Night. The script is done for that video, and I'm probably gonna start recording it, like, right after I'm done recording this, which is, like, in maybe a minute from now. So yeah, bye.